Louise Barbetti has been involved with the treaty negotiations for Haisla for perhaps the longest out of all of the current group. As an elder, Louise knows that just as a treaty affects all aspects of life for the Haisla, understanding the process cannot be fully done without looking at it in the context of the history of all of the changes that the Haisla have faced.
The real change came when the churches sent the first Christian person onto our reserve, and the church built the residential school right on the reserve, and that's what impacted our people the most, because all the children ended up, at the beginning it was built for the girls. They were going to civilize the Haisla people by taking the girls and putting them in the residential school. And actually the residential schools were the government's attempt to assimilate our people. Like we were no longer going to be Indians.
It was facts such as those that prompted Louise to get involved in working to make life better for the Haisla people.
One of the things that when we came on, our first, at that time that was under Gerald Amos, he was the chief negotiator, and I happened to be on the team. There's a number of us from council then, you know, and the thing that we put on the table, you know, and very important for the young people to realize is that the very first thing we put on the table is that we will never give up our right as Native people. And we will never give up our taxes. We will never give up our Aboriginal right to hunt and fish in our own territory. And we made that very clear. We fought with the government over those specific. And we still say that today.
It's that pride, strength, and determination of the Haisla people that is at the core of the fight for a fair agreement. One of the most important court cases to help in the fight for a fair settlement is the Delgamuukw case.
In Delgamuukw, the Supreme Court of Canada established a number of elements, one of them being the 1846 rule, which says that a First Nation must demonstrate that it had exclusive occupation in their lands and in their resources, and it's been uninterrupted since.
In Delgamuukw, unanimously, the Supreme Court of Canada said, no, there is such a thing as Aboriginal title, and it does mean the right of an Aboriginal people to use their territory in accordance with their own desires, in accordance with their own concept of what it should be used for. And that includes an economic aspect. It includes the right to use the territory for modern economic purposes. That didn't end the challenge, though. Each First Nation was then faced with the fairly significant challenge of laying out their evidence to their use and occupancy of the territory. And it's those practical challenges of laying out the evidence and the cost involved in doing that that makes Aboriginal title such a serious issue to litigate and such a difficult issue to resolve in the treaty process.
Anything after 1846 is an infringement that needs to be justified. So those principles start to apply to the Crown's infringements by awarding Alcan their lands and resources. For example, awarding West Fraser their tree farm license, awarding tenure to hunting and guiding outfitters. All of those things that the Crown has done and we haven't been compensated for, we haven't been consulted on. And so it's a core principle when you're negotiating to understand what it is that you have and designing a process to actually address them in a way that makes sense.
Ellis Ross is an elected council member and has been a part of the treaty team for over 5 years.
See, Delgamuukw alone didn't really answer all our questions. Haida 1 and Haida 2 didn't really answer all our questions. It didn't give us what we needed to to be able to compete in today's world. But if you put them all together, like if you combine them all and use them in your everyday business, including treaty, then you've got a strong background and a strong case to go get what you want.
Most people think that rights and title are about hunting and fishing and gathering, and there's much, much more to that. And the interesting legal aspect that Delgamuth established was that there is an economic component to our rights and title, and as long as it doesn't infringe the very rights that are protected by the Constitution, then that means that we can develop and bring ourselves into a modern context. And that is really the core principles of our economic model, is finding those opportunities and building on them that are consistent with our cultural principles. And I think the final thing that was important about Delgamuth is it was the first time that the Crown and all of the interveners, like the Business Council of BC, the BC Cattlemen, all of the provinces, Alcan, they lost big time. And it fundamentally changed the way that people looked at First Nations.
While the Haisla and other First Nations have gained strength from recent case law, there are still many difficult challenges the treaty team faces on a regular basis.
Both federal and provincial negotiators, they leave their negotiators in there for about 2 years, 3 years, then they pull them out. Next one that comes in demands, I want this issue here started, I want to start from this, right from the beginning of this issue here. Then we start all over again, talking about the same thing, only for them to change what they expect out of it. That's a difficult part of treaty. No matter what I try and say or do in that treaty, every last item is made difficult for us.
In a way, treaty is a different world from what I live in, like by being a counselor. It's a bit of a different world. It's got different mandates, it's got different directions, it's got different goals. From a table perspective, not from my own perspective. But trying to move in and out of treaty and back into my counselor business is two different worlds. And it's kind of tough to balance that. Whereas one, I know I have specific deadlines that I have to reach. You know, I know when I've accomplished a goal. Treaty is not quite like that.
We have to spend a lot of time on research, and a lot of our time has been spent. We have an archivist here who has put together all the information that's in this room. When I first started, there was 2 of us, actual staff people, who were working on treaty. Now I'm the only one who's working on treaty.
Along with Joanne, Ellis, and Steve, there's Rod Bolton, Louise Barbetti, Ken Hall, Henry Amos, and the legal counsel led by Alan Donovan that make up the current Haisla Treaty team.
And the others are not paid staff, and they just come to attend the meetings. They read up on all the documents that we have here. And we basically prepare to go to the next negotiating meeting.
Over the course of 1 year, the team can attend up to 2 meetings a month, many of the meetings lasting 2 or more days.
We also have our own pre-treaty meeting before we go to the meeting with Canada or BC. And I'm pretty sure that they do their own too. So a lot of time is spent on it.
At least 1 meeting a month is held in Vancouver.
As you can imagine, BC and Canada have a huge resources behind them. One of the negotiators, I think it's from Canada, that's his main job, is a negotiator, nothing else. Whereas here, the chief negotiator is also the chief counselor and the council.
In spite of the challenges, the treaty team continues to advance the Haisla positions at every opportunity.